Now, we've been talking about Christians being skeptical of the spiritual realm, especially the dark side of the spiritual realm. But even non-believers or non-religious people, non-Christians, are pretty skeptical of things like hell and Satan. I've talked to Satanists who are like, no, we don't even believe in Satan. We're just trying to basically be rebellious. And it seems to be, every poll that I look at seems to indicate that more people believe in heaven than hell by far. More people believe in angels than demons by far, whether they're Christians or not. How do you talk to non-religious skeptics about the reason you believe in the dark side and why you think they should too?
Well, I think the reason people focus on the positive things, such as heaven or angels, is because we all want to think about that which is good. But we also have to realize there are consequences to our actions and the choices that we make. We can all desire, to be in heaven and think about angelic creatures, for example. But we also have to realize that if we don't live in the manner that God has created us to live, there are consequences to that. And the consequences, again, would be eternal damnation, separation from God. And again, you think of separation from God, you think of the devil and his angels. And I think a lot of people just don't want to think about the bad. We live in an age where I think people believe that freedom means that we can do whatever we want. But I believe that freedom in the true sense of the word means to be obedient to God. That when we are obedient to God, that's freedom in the true sense of the word. When we start to believe that freedom means we can do whatever we want, then we end up becoming slaves to our own passions and desires. So I do think there's a lot of people today that want to say, I can do whatever I want, but then I still want to go to heaven. But again, the goal of the Christian person, again, the goal of every person would be to live in the manner that God created us to live. There's a lot of people today that I believe live by 3 guiding principles. You may do whatever you wish. No one has the right to command you, and you are the God of yourself. And these are really the temptations that were presented by the serpent to Adam and Eve there in the garden. And there's a lot of people today that still live by those principles. I want to do whatever I want to do, but at the end of the day, I want to go to heaven. I want to be with God. But again, the choices we make do have consequences on our eternal salvation.
It's not just that I want to go to heaven. It's almost like I deserve it. That's what I hear a lot.
Yeah,
I'm entitled to it in a way.
That's good.
Yeah, it's human nature, I guess. You've talked a lot already, and I have too, about this, the devil and demons. And before we get too far, I want to make sure we're being clear on what we're talking about. So who is the devil, and what do we know about him?
What we know about, so who is the devil? It's based on biblical teachings. It's also based on some of the tradition that comes out of the early days of the church. So the early days of Christianity. There's some writings by, perhaps people might be familiar with, the writer Pseudo-Dionysius, who wrote the Celestial Hierarchy. Again, that was written in the first centuries of Christianity. So Lucifer is believed to be the greatest of all the angelic creatures, closest to the throne of God. Lucifer is a name that means light bearer. We think of God, we think of light. You think of a picture of a saint. What do you see around their head? There's a glow, a halo. It's not their glory they're radiating, but the glory of God. So much did they bring their lives in conformity to what God desires. So if you think about it, what's the only thing that God does not have from us? It's our free will. So God created angels, he created humans, and gave us free will. The goal of the spiritual life would be to unite our wills to the will of God. So God created the angels, gave them intellectual knowledge, and then basically said, with the knowledge I have given you, with your free will you now turn towards me? And then Lucifer, rather than turning to God, turned away from God, and his decision to rebel against God influenced 1/3 of the angels. The book of Revelation speaks about how his tail swept 1/3 of the angels out, 1/3 of the stars out of the sky. Sometimes stars are references to angels. So Lucifer's decision to rebel against God influenced 1/3 of the angels, who then turned their backs on God and now referred to Lucifer as their leader. And then after the fall, Lucifer becomes Satan, the devil, and again, so he now was cast down from heaven and down to the earth. So after Lucifer rebelled, it's important to note he was not cast out of creation, he was cast out of heaven. God still had a role for him to play, and we see that role being played out, in our lives today. So the devil is someone who rebelled against God and then influenced others to do the same, other angelic creatures. And what he tries to do today is to get humans to do the very same thing, to turn our backs on God and literally become gods ourselves. That's what he said to Eve in the garden. Surely you will not die, you will become like gods. In other words, you don't need God, you can be God yourself.